How will the MLB rule changes affect fantasy baseball? Find out next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5. Today is Monday, January 16th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. And let's start off with rule change number 1, which is the pitch timer. Frankly, this probably won't affect fantasy baseball very much, but I'll quickly run through it. There will be a 30-second timer between batters, and between pitches, there will be a 15-second timer with the bases empty, a 20-second timer with runners on base. What matters more for fantasy is that this rule also includes limited pickoff throws to first base. So pitchers are limited to 2 disengagements, which are pickoff attempts or step-offs, per plate appearance. If a third pickoff attempt is made, the runner automatically advances 1 base if the pickoff attempt is not successful. And with this rule in place in the minors last season, steal attempts per game have increased from 2.23 in 2019 at a 68% success rate to 2.83 in 2022 and a 77% success rate. Scott, I've talked way too much, but this is why we think steals are going to be way up in fantasy baseball this season.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. If after 2 disengagements, which may or may not include pickoff attempts, the pitcher's not allowed to throw over again unless he gets the runner out. Otherwise, the runner gets to the next base for free. Like, that's going to encourage runners to take really big leads. And in fact, maybe really big leads on before those 2 disengagements, just to encourage those disengagements. And MLB itself has said that if the increase in the majors is comparable to what we saw in the minors, then it's going to return us to early 2000s in terms of how much teams run. So you look at the year 2000 itself, there were 3 players with over 50 steals. One had 62, Luis Castillo. There were 42 players with 20 or more steals. That's compared to in 2021, there was only 19. There was less than half as many as in 2000. So that itself goes to show you how much the increase could be. And I have a feeling it could be even more than that, because since the early 2000s, that was the Moneyball era where those ideas were basically being spread throughout front offices. And since then, stolen bases have been discouraged because they've been deemed too risky, to the point that Major League base stealers already have a success rate of 78% because they're so careful about when they run. So, we saw how much the success rate increased in the minors. If that success rate gets up over 80%, maybe even closing in on 85%, it's hard to say stealing bases is going to be too risky anymore. So it may go from being a contribution that is discouraged at the major league level in a way it never has been in the minors to one that's encouraged, in which case the increases could be even beyond what we saw in the minors. And I'm kind of throwing all expectations for stolen bases considering. Like, I am not going to prioritize them as much in drafts. Obviously, I want to make sure I have some, but I think there's going to be a democratization of stolen bases where bunches are coming from players we would have never guessed they'd come from before, and that's going to make it a very difficult stat to predict, and one you're liable to overpay for in drafts.
All right, let's talk about the other big rule change that could affect fantasy baseball: defensive shift limits. Per MLB.com, the defensive team must have a minimum of 4 players on the infield, with at least 2 infielders completely on either side of second base. These restrictions are intended to increase the batting average on balls in play, to allow infielders to better showcase their athleticism, and to restore more traditional outcomes on batted balls. As a result, Scott, I think the players who typically have been shifted most in the past, mostly, left-handed pull hitters, could see an increase in batting average. And on the flip side, we're probably going to see some ground ball pitchers or pitchers who pitch to contact have slightly higher ERAs and whips.
Yeah, whips especially. ERAs are on the decline because home runs are on the decline. But relative to ERAs, I see whips going up more because of this. And I don't think the effect is going to be as widespread as the stolen base issue. I think more likely you're going to see a handful of hitters see their batting averages improve by a lot, maybe by 30 to 40 points even, because they're not being shifted on anymore. But it's a very particular group that gets shifted on a lot, makes enough contact, puts the ball on the ground enough that they're actually going to feel the effects of that. Corey Seager's the biggest name probably, but others that come to mind are Kyle Schwarber, Matt Olson. I think somebody like Rowdy Tellez could see a big increase just looking at his expected batting average versus his actual batting average last year. The effect might be more widespread in the pitching ranks. You mentioned ground ball pitchers. I prioritized ground ball pitchers during the juice ball era just because a ground ball minute couldn't be a fly ball, which couldn't be a home run. But now fly balls aren't being hit for home runs as often. And if ground balls are going to become hits more often, then maybe fly ball pitchers who don't give up a lot of home runs, maybe they're more where the focus should be. So guys like Nestor Cortez, Tristan McKenzie, we've already seen them obviously perform well last year. And I think that could become even more the case. I'm not overhauling my draft strategy as much in light of this room because I think the effects are harder to predict, but it is going to have an impact on the game moving forward for sure.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we'll be back again on Wednesday morning. Bye-bye.